on next week's episode. We're going to talk about zones versus man-on-man. But first of all, welcome to We Should Run the AFL, episode 3.
Yeah, and I'm Wally, and that's Jez, and that's next week. But first of all, before we do that, we are going to do this week's episode. And what are we talking about this week, Jez?
This week we are talking about stats. We've got a couple of really good ones that I think you're going to enjoy. And to be honest, we actually recorded this episode last week. And due to the ineptitude of one of us, being me, we only recorded the audio of Wally. So we are re-recording this, and we have no idea if it's going to be as good as last week's episode because we think it was absolute gold.
We smashed it last week. It was amazing.
Really good. So we might put in a little snippet from last week just to show how it looks. You can you'll hear some of Wally and you'll see my mouth moving, but you won't hear anything from me, which is how many people prefer it, to be honest. So.
we actually just looked at a little clip before, and you were saying something, and I just cracked up laughing, and we're like, "What was it? What were you saying? It was gold."
I don't know, but I do have an idea before we get stuck into it. I just think because we're side by side, would it look like we're almost, I know the backgrounds are different, but would it look like we're almost like in the same room talking to each other if I sort of turn this way and look like that and you turn your chair the other way? I'm like, yeah, no, I see what you mean there, Wally.
Yeah, no, let's go this way, I reckon. almost. Which is good. Also, we haven't done as we sort of say, we're going to do each week a bit of a recap of the round once the footy starts.
Yes.
Oh, actually, even hopefully once the pre-season starts, I reckon we can do some of that too. But in a quick recap of my week, it's been a pretty interesting week. I got scammed and lost all my crypto that I'd invested in because I'm stupid. How about you, Jez?
Yeah, my week, I did not get scammed. So, yeah, it was a good week.
The win.
Amazing. So this week's episode, as we said, is about stats. And the first one that we want to talk about is disposal efficiency. It's a bit of a pet hate of mine. I don't like the term efficiency. That to me, and it's something I think we talked about it last week, but I think efficiency is more to do with time, getting things done in a timely manner, as opposed to accuracy, which I think is more, it's probably still not the right word, which we'll get to in a moment, but it's more aligned with what they're trying to accomplish with that stat. But do you have is there a stat? Yeah, the glossary definition.
Well, it's pretty good. I actually looked up disposal efficiency, and this is on Champion Data, and it says percentage of disposal that are effective. So that is helpful. We actually found. Now where was it? There's like when we look then at effective. An effective long kick is a kick of more than 40 meters to a 50-50 contest or better. Because I always wondered that if you kick it and your teammate drops the mark, is it effective? But if you kicked it to a contest of 50-50 or better, even if the person's on their own, if they drop their mark, that seems to indicate it's still counted as an effective long kick. And then the short kick, a kick of less than 40 meters that results in the intended target retaining possession. So in that case, they either have to mark it or pick it up or keep possession somehow. So if it gets spoiled, that's not effective. So the 50-50 contest doesn't come into account there. But even if they just drop it and someone else picks it up and runs off, that wouldn't count as effective either, going by that definition.
So I would love to know where they came up with 40 meters being the above or below sort of line.
I wonder if it's because, well, I don't know for you. I give it everything. I reckon I can go about 45. So maybe it's just what the average person, it becomes a long kick. I can somehow I could do like a pass. Like I could just, not chip pass, but I could do it and get 30 to 35 easy. I give it everything. It goes like 8 meters more. It's like, this is so unfair. How does this happen?
I mean, I would dream of kicking at 40 meters. It's been a lifelong goal that I don't think I will ever achieve. But seriously, why 40? Why not 35 or 30 or whatever it is? Like, that's what I would like to know. Like, where they came up with the number 40. It feels very arbitrary to me. And, like if somebody, kicks at 39 meters, it's no longer considered an effective kick because it hasn't gone over that 40, even if it,
Well, it still can be an effective kick if their teammate marks it. But yeah, if it goes to a 50-50 or whatever,
50-50.
they spot it, yeah. And so, yeah, and it probably is totally arbitrary, but it kind of has to be, doesn't it? Like they've got to pluck a number somewhere and they've just decided. So I think that probably matters a little less. And it also depends, it's probably a bit of a guess potentially. Anyway, like the stats, the guy doing the stats or the woman doing the stats isn't going to know exactly. They're just going to go, that was about 40, I reckon. Like, I reckon a lot of it's going to be until they put the GPS in the ball, when they'll know exactly how long kicks have gone, it's going to be kind of a guess anyway.
But I wonder if there's some way, excuse me, there's some sort of, some algorithms in their data collection to do with the play positions, because the players, usually have some sort of GPS involved with their movement. So I wonder if it's something to do with that, like when they kick it to a certain position. Obviously, not all the kicks land at a person. Sometimes land in open field, but if they do, there's some way of measuring that distance. So they might have the specifics or the the exact measurements.
Yeah, maybe.
And then you got like, what if a player, like what if I had made it to the AFL, I could never ever get an effective kick for a 50-50 contest because I can't kick 40 meters.
So you'd be Tony Shaw. All your effective kicks would be effective Shaw kicks, and that doesn't matter. Like, that'd be fine anyway. So
yeah.
But here's one for you. Going by that definition, let's say I kick it along the ground in your general direction, right? Like, I see you running towards the wing. I'm in the half back line. Kick it along the ground or in the air, and then it sort of bounce, and you just pick it up, right? Just bounce into your hands. You pick it up, or you run and pick it up. Is that an effective kick? Because I've kicked it and we've retained possession. Does it have to be on the full? Like, does it have to be a mark?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To add to it, does it have to be like, what does a retained possession mean as well? Because what if you did that and it bounced up in front of me and I saw somebody running alongside me and I just tap it over my head? Like, is that considered retention because I'm the next one to have, sort of, in a sense, possessed the ball, even though I haven't got a disposal for it, and I've passed, tapped it on, hopefully to the advantage of my teammate, but then it might not go to their advantage. So is it based on them, a clear retention of the ball, or was my tap on considered retention?
Well, that's right. And it's whether retention is the team as a whole or the person you're theoretically trying to get it to as well. So, which brings up a few other things in my mind. One is that, which I'm pretty sure it's not counted as a stat again. And that's the other thing we do want to say is a lot of this stuff we're going to talk about, especially with stats, is there's probably lots of stats that the teams keep or the clubs keep or the even the media might potentially keep that we don't necessarily see. So the clubs will have a lot of stats that we don't see in the public. And one of them might be, I always think, like tap-ons. And so you can sometimes a tap can be the most effective, even if it's in the bottom of a pack and someone punches it out and someone that clears someone out, they get it out of the pack, or it's in the air, they tap it. And I don't know, this is again, apologies to everyone, we will talk about Collingwood a lot, but in the 2010 grand final, I'm pretty sure in both, like the replay and the original, Chris Daw, like it bounced up, he did this little tap to someone in general play, tapped it over, they got it, kicked it, and they got a goal from that. And like that tap wouldn't have been recorded as a stat, but it was almost the most effective part of that passage of play, because if he just grabbed it and got tackled, that play's over. So
would that be included?
I think it's recorded.
Will that be included in 1%ers?
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know
what 1%ers is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other one now. What's included in 1%ers?
1%ers. That's right. And so the other thing that brought for me, in what you're saying just before with that sort of retaining possession and kicking, is that efficiency thing. And again, and we did chat about it. I don't think we've mentioned the word yet today, but disposal impact as opposed to disposal effectiveness or efficiency, because I could do a total miss kick. I could be trying to kick it to you. There could be a guy 20 meters to your right. I'm aiming for you, but do total stuff up and it goes to the other guy on our team. He marks it and sufficient kick, which is true. But was I being efficient? No, I was kind of being just useless.
Inefficient.
And so, but impact, and again, that tap on or that kick to someone in, and they get it, then that impact of that kick is almost more important than the efficiency, which, as you said, in the terms of the word itself, isn't really the correct word to use grammatically.
Well, also, like if you just give a dinky 1 meter handball to somebody that you're not going to miss, like that's going to give you a better disposal efficiency, but it's not really. It may not be impactful. It may be if it's somebody running past, but it might also just be a really nothing, sort of possession, or like when you
possession almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing with impact is that times of the game is going to affect that. Time of the game and score is going to affect it. So, for example, if it's, I don't know, during the first or second quarter or whatever, and you see teams sometimes, and it's very frustrating to watch when they're just chipping it around sort of the back line. That's not impacting anything, right? That's just impacting our interest level and making it drop. But if that's like a minute to go and you're 3 points up, that's so impactful to kick it backwards 20 meters to someone. So impact can really change, as opposed to just number of disposals or number of kicks, or even efficiency. And so what you're trying to do, if you're behind, you're trying to get a goal, the impact of that is going to be zero impact. Well, almost a negative impact, isn't it? And then, but if you're trying to save the game, then that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just writing down that it made me think, and this is probably more for when we get to our add remove, but it's really contextual impact, isn't it? Like, depending on the context of the game as to whether a kick or a disposal can have more impact than another one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, speaking of impact, the other stat we want to look at is like meters gained and how that works. And we did look up a little definition for that. Let me just zoom into that, because we weren't sure, did it matter if the player was, if they kicked it backwards, is that a negative meters gained? Or if they kick it, sideways, is that just zero? Even if that could be really, really impactful to kick it 50 meters sideways, and open up the game. So the definition of meters gained, there's a couple of different ones.
Sorry to interrupt for a second. We also wanted to know whether kicking away from your goal was negative meters gained. Yeah, and then I think we'll hear it when you read it out, but I think it was an interesting definition from memory.
There was. And there's actually a couple of different ones. There's meters gained effective, meters gained assisted, but the general meters gained is net meters gained with the ball by a player by running, kicking, or handballing, combining measures towards attacking goal and away from defensive goal, which potentially could be the same thing.
I'm pretty sure it is. So
that might be a typo.
So it still doesn't really clarify though about the negative meters gained question, does it?
Unless it's net meters gained in that towards your goal is a positive and away from your goal is a negative. So potentially it could be negative meters gained if that is just a typo in the definition.
Yeah, because I mean, like if I was to get a game in AFL and I managed to get my hands on the ball, the odds are that I'm going to have negative meters gained, right? I'm probably just going to get rid of it as quick as I can before I get my head smashed in.
And don't even realize which way you're kicking it.
Yeah, I won't even care. I'll just kick it regardless of which way it goes.
Just fall away. Yeah, that's right. But I think that's an important thing, and that's where suddenly combining different stats are really important. Like if you had disposal impact and meters gained, someone could end up with 20 meters gained, but 80% disposal impact or something like that, if they were really important little chips backward or whatever it might be, or kicks across the ground. So yeah, it's a really interesting one, meters gained. And then even like if you kick it, let's the meters gained effective, or again, total meters gained by a player or team from effective disposal. So in terms of meters gained again, then there's assisted, as well. So total meters gained by a teammate that receives an uncontested possession from your disposal. So if I kick it to you and you're 30 meters in the clear, and then you run 40 meters and kick it 50, I get 90 meters assisted meters gained and they get 90 meters gained. But then also it's that thing of like, if I kick it 50 meters or 60 meters to a pack and it just gets punched out, it's obviously not effective, but I think that still counts as meters gained towards the attacking goal. It's just not effective unless it's 50-50.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless it's 50-50. So then, yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. I don't know.
The thing we've got to wonder is, do any of these stats actually matter? Like, it's kind of interesting, but disposals especially, I think, have lost their meaning a bit over the years when there is so much chipping around and keeping possession and zones and everything, which again we're going to talk about next week. But the other stat that, in terms of does it have any meaning or not, that a lot of people are critical of, especially, funnily enough, especially in the last couple of years since Nick Dacos came on the scene, and especially when he was playing halfback early, they were saying, why does he's getting 30 odd possessions, but they're saying, yeah, but he kicked out 5 times. And if you leave the goal square on a kick out after a point and you kick it, you get a stat for that. And they're saying that you shouldn't get a stat for that. What we believe, and which we're going to delve into a little bit now, is that, it is like, if and I saw a clip the other day where he ran out of the goal square, took 3 bounces, handballed it. I think he handballed it and got it back. But even that first handball, then he gets it back and he kicks it. That handball was to someone near the 50-meter line. So he's gained 50 meters and given it to someone else who gave it back. So I don't understand how that's not a stat. And the other thing is, I believe if you kick it out of the goal square, like we've seen players who, kick a torp out of the goal square and it's reached the center square, but that's not a stat. Like, how I don't really get how that doesn't count.
And on top of that is, like, if you kick it out from the goal square and somebody marks it, it's a mark, and you can't mark it if it hasn't been kicked. So it has to be a stat if it's been kicked. So
right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if we're going to put value on stats, that's a really important stat, regardless of where the player marks it. It has to, as you say, it has to have been kicked out. It has to have been kicked for it to count as a mark, and if it's a mark, then it has to be a kick, which theoretically is a stat.
Exactly, and I assume it's still a rule. If you kick it out, if you kick out and it bounces over the boundary line and nobody touches it, it's a free kick to the other team. So it's essentially like you've kicked it out on the full.
Yep.
Again, you have to have kicked it for that to have occurred. So there has to be a stat.
Has to be a stat. So all right, we solved that one pretty quick.
Also, I mean, and this is not really a very good argument for it, but there are plenty of players throughout history who, prior to the modern style of football, would have been the fullbacks kicking out. And if they didn't get that as a stat, they wouldn't have any stats. Some of them,
they often didn't. Like, there'd be fullbacks who would. They played a cracking game, kept the full forward to, nothing, but it counted as like 2 handballs for the day or something like that. But
exactly,
actually really effective. But again, they might have had 10 kickouts that were, and that's the other thing. What if, because there's that stat, I'm going to get it wrong, but where you're like part of a scoring chain type thing.
Yeah, score involvement.
Well, if you kick it to someone who kicks it to someone, kicks it to someone, they get a goal, you're part of the. Are you part of the score involvement if yours doesn't count as a stat if you haven't left the goal square? Like you are. And again, maybe the most important because it started the scoring chain.
Well, I mean, again, as we've mentioned in every episode, and we continue to do, we always reference Collingwood games because that's what we watch. But the one from a couple of years ago when Elliott kicked the winning goal after the siren against Essendon, and that came from that.
Remember it? Can you refresh my memory?
Well, that came from the kick out. I can't remember. Was it
Pendles?
Pendles kicked it to Darcy Moore from memory, and then
exactly, and then he kicked it to Bianco to Jamie Elliott. So Pendles was part of the scoring chain. I think he did run out of the square, but you're right. If that's not counted, or if he'd stayed in the square, again, that kick, which was so important because there was 40 seconds to go or something like that. It had to be spot on and go. So it just in terms of placing value on stat, and again stat impact as well, and all that sort of thing, then it should count. And it's part of the game. And again, people may say it's not part of general play, but it is. If I kick it out and they mark it and kick it back and it's a goal, then that kick is really important that I've done negatively for the team. So so it's a really interesting one, and one that just stats in general, like what a lot of reliance is put on it. Like even I'll hear often people saying, whoever's at half back had a great game, had 25 disposals. It's like, but did his did the half forward kick any goals? Like, isn't that
Yeah.
also the most important thing? But it becomes all of this obsession with possession.
I like that. Hey, obsession with possession.
I should write some rhyme.
No, I agree totally. I think that sort of leads us into the next segment, which is the ad remove. It leads us in really nicely. And I've actually, before we came on, we sort of had like, I think one maybe or two ads. I can probably double that for us now. I've written down a couple more that I would like to add.
I've got an add and a remove, so maybe we can do one each.
Okay, I don't know if I have any removes, but I'm happy to go with the ads.
Okay.
Do you want to go with do you want to start with your remove first?
Yeah. So my remove I'm thinking of is to remove the hit out stat. And I know not saying ruckmen aren't important, all that sort of stuff, but you see often that a ruckman will have 50 hit outs to the opposition's 35 or whatever it might be. So 50 hit outs, but they lose the clearances. And so in that case, like, who cares? Like, it's, again, you can look at it and say, well, they weren't effective. So that's something to work on, things like that. But to me, removing that hit out stat and just having the stat be clearances, which seems to be more important to me, because also a hit out can just get into a pack again. You can do another ball up, and you can do that 5 times, have a chance to get a hit every time, and who cares?
Yeah.
So, and I know there's effective hit outs and hit outs to advantage and stuff like that, which I think is probably more important. But if you just have it as clearances, and that's the stat you focus on, regardless of who hits it out, and you could have an assisted clearance where the ruckman had, because there's kind of nothing. There are things, but like one of the most thrilling things is seeing a ruckman tap it to someone sprinting past who grabs it and then kicks it to a forward on the lead. Like, that's amazing. But again, if you just worry about a clearance and go, yeah, that was a clearance, but it was an assisted clearance, amazing. So, or an effective clearance or whatever you might want to call it. I reckon that'd be good. Get rid of the hit outs and just have it as clearances.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. Yeah, and even the hit outs to advantage doesn't really cut it, I don't think. Advantage doesn't really explain what that means.
Yeah, true. Does it just mean they got their hands in it, or it led to a clearance, or like if you hit it to me and I get it but then get tackled, you've hit it out to advantage even though I didn't do anything with it.
Exactly. And you might have kicked it, it might have turned it over as well from the kick from the tackle. So yeah, I don't really like the hit outs to advantage. I think clearance or effective clearance, I think is impactful one is much more on the money. I agree.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. So what so you may not have a remove. You can do 2 ads if you want. I'll do an add and remove. You can add 2 things if you got them.
I've got 3.
All right. What's the first stat you'd add? I'll just sit back.
Well, one that I wanted was like some sort of metric for off the ball movement by players where they're creating space for other teammates. Excuse me. So like, we talk about forwards and their leading patterns, and sometimes the forward will lead in direction and take a defender or maybe even 2 defenders with them and create that space behind for the next person on their team to lead into whatever. And I feel like that it's a stat that would be really interesting.
Definitely. Kind of one that clubs may have. Again, we don't know clubs may have that, because often you'll hear someone in an interview, like a reporter or a player, or whatever, an interview saying, yeah, they didn't get much of the ball, they're getting criticised, but you don't realise what they do off the ball and how important that is. So they may recognise it even if we don't get a stat. But I agree. I think it's a really important one.
And I mean, with that is, first of all, when we're talking about stats, we're really talking about stats for us, the public, as opposed to the clubs. But another Collingwood reference would have been the 2002 Anzac Day, I think it was, when it was Scott Cummings in our team, and I think he had 1 possession for the game. And I think even the commentators at the time saying it's the best 1 possession game in history. Like, it was wet conditions, didn't suit him. He was, I think it was coming towards the end of his career, but the way he just competed and brought that ball to ground and got it out of bounds and these sorts of things, that sort of thing. So it's not quite the same as this, I know that, but that metric of how impactful he was even without having touched the ball, really.
Yeah, that's right. It's good. Yeah, no, I like that one. That's excellent. And it would take a lot of, it would help the fans to see that, because often we do be like, what's he even doing out there? Like, what he's like, he's not doing this thing. But if we knew, he's running these leading patterns that open things up or help them do this and that, amazing. That'd be great. That'd be really great to know.
Exactly. Or Frampton from the 2023 grand final.
Best 2 possession game ever. He could
Exactly.
have kicked. Also, he dropped two of the easiest marks ever. He really could have kicked 2 goals. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So
Yeah, what's
my
your one?
ad, just to jump in, is I reckon it'd be cool to have like either a clutch rating stat or a pressure stat. Some not pressure of applying pressure, but your disposals under pressure and your clutch rating. So again, going back to that Jamie Elliott one, a kick after the siren from where the 50 meets the boundary to win the game, that's massive pressure. Like that's going to be clutch, 100% clutch type thing. Whereas me chipping it backwards to you 30 meters in the back line with no pressure because there's a zone, then that's going to be a much lower impact rating. And even we were saying things like, the wind comes into it, the time of the game, even the number of people in the crowd. So an empty ground and, there's 11,000 people at the MCG and you're 50 points up, there's not a lot of pressure on your shot for goal. But if it's 100,000 people screaming and it's the first shot at goal, the last, whatever it might be, suddenly that pressure is up. And they talk about with golf, if you're, you do a 50 centimeter putt, which is really pretty simple, and you tap it in, no worries. Then you go to do it again and someone says, all right, let's put $100,000 on it. And suddenly that 50 centimeter putt becomes a whole different ball game. And I reckon the same is in footy. The shot for goal 15 meters out, 3 minutes into the game, as opposed to win the game. Your brain is suddenly overthinking that thing. So I reckon a clutch rating would be great.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a painful one for you and I, so I apologize for bringing it up, but Dom Sheed in 2018 grand final, I mean, that was as clutch as you can get, really.
Exactly.
So that's a perfect example of that. But yeah, I agree. I think it's a great stat that would be really beneficial for all of us when we're watching. Yeah. So another one from mine, and this is probably part of a topic that could almost take up another episode, but and I think we've talked about it already in the past, but holding the ball, I would like a team holding the ball stat, because sometimes you have a player get the ball, and then someone will go to tackle them and they'll manage to shrug the tackle, turn around, and they get, clobbered by a second person, and that's holding the ball.
Kind of cool when that happens, yeah.
Yeah, and the second tackler is the one who gets the stat for the holding the ball, whereas it was the first one's pressure from, which I know they might get, pressure act or whatever, but I feel like it's a team holding the ball situation where they've actually contributed to that free kick as opposed to just the pressure. So
I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
So team holding the ball. I mean, I don't know. I think Dwayne Russell, I think he's talked about, or someone's talked about, like having that as an actual free kick as well, even if the player does end up getting a disposal away, but if they've been tackled 2 or 3 times or whatever, and as a crowd member, you're calling out ball, and you're just not getting it, and this is ridiculous. It should be like after a point in time, you know what, you've had enough attempts from, it's holding the ball, even if you didn't get it proper holding the ball in the end.
Yes, if they're solid tackles, I mean, if someone is sort of running through and just breaking a few tackles, that's kind of awesome. You want to let that go. But if they sort of get they're held and they get away, and then, that's a bit different. No, I love it. Just a bit mindful of time, but did you have another one?
Yeah, the other one, and it's really quick, would be the reverse of the meters gained would be like meters lost due to a turnover. So if you turn the ball over and the other team gets it and then they, take it down the field 50 meters or more, you get almost like a negative rating. You had like 50 meters negative, or 50 meters lost due to turnover or something like that.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because if they had that assisted meters gained,
exactly,
like you gain 100, it's kind of the exact reverse of that. So it's a good one. And that'd be hard to look at, wouldn't it? That'd be real hard.
Imagine the media with that. That'd have a field day.
That's right. You had 400 meters gained, which was great. You negative 800.
Yeah.
Love it. Awesome. So we'll start wrapping this up. We're gonna look at our love hate as well, just for our final segment. And our first, actually, you can do the first love hate because this is what one of your mates suggested.
Yeah. So we have had some fan feedback, as we like to call it, and it is singular. Fan? It is singular, fan, not fans feedback. And that was around the use of the acronym AFL as a verb. So like, do you play AFL? Maybe it's not a verb, but anyway, do you play AFL as opposed to do you play football? And we were talking about like, you wouldn't necessarily say, do you play NFL or
NBA?
Yeah, or do you play ARL? You play basketball, or you play footy, or you play American footy, or rugby, or whatever.
That's right. But if you're in the AFL and the NFL or the NBA, then you're playing AFL.
Yes, but usually, the conversations are more for the majority of people who aren't in those situations. Exactly. And so that was a pet hate of shout out to you, Rocky. Pet hate of Rocky's.
And is it a love or a hate for you?
For me, well, I really would like to go with what you wanted to have last time, which was sitting on the fence. I don't mind, but we have to do love hate. Look, I'm actually gonna go love. I don't doesn't really affect me, so I don't really care too much about it. I don't feel strong enough to say that I hate it, so I think I've just for that reason it's more I'll go love.
Well, yeah, cool. And I guess I'm probably similar, and the way around it, I guess, is, and what a lot of us would say, and it's more when we're explaining it to someone else, I reckon, that we'd say it. Whereas if we're talking amongst ourselves, we would say footy or Aussie rules. And again, easier for us because we'll say soccer instead of football for soccer. So to say we play football, that can confuse. If we're talking to someone from England and say we play football, they'll think we mean soccer. So if we say AFL or Aussie rules, then it makes it a bit easier. Yeah, exactly. And the other one we're going to do for love hate was, should umpires get stats before they cast their Brownlow votes, which is something that's been talked about quite a bit, especially recently and especially after last year, I think, as well.
Well, I think we probably need to rephrase it because it's, love it or hate it. So umpires should be allowed to look at stats before voting.
Good one. Love it or hate it.
So based on the current stats, if it's based, well, that's the thing. We don't know what stats they have available either. We don't know if they're getting the ones that clubs get or the ones that we get as a public.
I reckon in terms of time, they probably just get disposals, is my guess, and tackles maybe. I don't reckon they get much more than that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably more the stats that we would have access to.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with hate it.
Yep.
Based on, I think that if they brought in our stats, I think I'd love it. If they had all the impactful ones. Yeah. But because they don't, and you look at last year's Brownlow with Cripps and Dacos, like that was just crazy. And I'm sure that that would have been based on how many times they thought they saw them with the ball, not necessarily how impactful they were. So I hate the idea of them using stats.
Yeah, me too. I agree. And if it's impactful, then that is different. If they're getting that, and it can be impactful disposals, impactful tackles, impactful whatever it is, and then you have that, and then it goes with their feel. And if it is kind of just almost if they, because you can have someone who gets 30 disposals and you haven't even really noticed them, and they haven't, they have just been chipping around and not doing much. But if it was even just to clarify, like if they wrote down their votes and then were maybe allowed to look at the stats to go, that might be some confirmation. So maybe that's a little bit different. But I just don't know that best on ground isn't always about stats. As we've said, a full back can play an amazing game.
Exactly.
Restrict Charlie Curnow to one touch and beats them in 10 one-on-ones. They'd never get recognition for that in terms of a Brownlow vote, but theoretically they have won the game. If they don't do that, he's kicking 8 goals and you're probably not going to win. So I think I'm not a fan of it. So I'm a bit of a hate that they, and even if they got ours, I think it's just one of the quirks of it in a way as well. And I know there's probably ways we can refine and improve it, but and last year was a bit of an anomaly, I think, of voting, so.
Well, I think it's probably due an episode, that one. I reckon we could do a whole episode on the Brownlow voting.
I think it is too. Yeah. But for now we say we hate it, and that's why we
should run the AFL.